Okay.
All right, let's go.
Let's start it. Okay. This is episode 1 of Closed on Sundays.
Woo! All right.
Gotta get the energy.
Yes. So I don't even come up with an introduction.
What is your name and what do you do?
Yes. Okay. So my name is Amy, and I am a current member at QPEM, Queen's Presbyterian English Ministry, and I am with my co-host here,
Austin, hi. Hi, my name's Austin. I'm a pastor serving at KAPCQ, Korean American Presbyterian Church of Queens. I'm the children's pastor there, and Amy and I are the co-hosts of this podcast called Closed on Sundays.
Yes. So Austin, do you want to talk about how we know each other real quick?
Oh yeah, so me and Amy go way back. We've been friends since we actually attended Stony Brook together, our college, and we've been
back.
Way back
How
is
old are
about.
you?
Didn't you guys just graduate like last year?
I'm a good 27 years old. I think we became friends. We met each other when we were around 18, 19?
19,
yeah.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah, we were in the same Christian club together at college, and yeah, we've been good friends ever since.
Oh yeah. No, he's been a good mentor, a good buddy, and a lot of
I like him. He's all right.
Thanks, Leslie.
and a lot of parts of life. So we decided to come together and start this new journey.
Yeah.
So we have.
Wait, quick question. Why is it called Closed on Sunday? Because we are open on Sunday.
This is true.
This is true.
12 p.m.
Churches are
So,
open. 10:30.
It is closed on Sundays because we will be talking about topics that we don't necessarily talk about in church or during service. At least it's topics that we wait to talk about until after church, when we're hanging out with our friends, fellowship with our other members, and then we get relaxed, we get friendly, and then we talk about these topics. So we kind of wanted to break that barrier and kind of have it in the open, be transparent, be real, but also discuss the word, discuss the truth, be very intentional. So
Can I add that I think it's such a good idea to have something like this, because the toughest topic I think a lot of people have trouble talking about is dating.
So I think good that you said that, Levy. Love that segue. So today's topic, our very first topic, is actually going to be about dating in the Christian realm and as Christians.
And we have a special guest joining us today.
Oh, we do. We do have a special guest joining us.
Special guest joining us to provide his great wisdom and insight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is. Look at the camera. We're new to this. We're all new to this, so show some grace, especially when you like, comment, and subscribe, and rate us 5 stars on your local podcast app. But my name is Pastor Richard. I'm the associate pastor over at QPEM, where Amy also attends, and also our wonderful cameraman Levy behind the decks. He's there, and I'm the young adult pastor, so I oversee the young adult congregation, which is 18 to 35 years old. We also take care of worship and all this other fun stuff. But it's good to be here. I think when Amy brought up this idea, this is the most excited I've ever seen you, for sure. Amy also serves on the media team, and she's good at that. But she came running up to me with this great idea, and I was like, is it going to just be like a new slide background or something? But, she said she wanted to bust out this podcast. And I think the idea of, conversations where, especially, at our church, we're going through our sermon series through Judges. So maybe, Judges 18 won't really have a great relevance or segue to dating in our, modern world. So I think in that way, there are a lot of conversations that Christians want to talk about, but maybe they, like you were saying, wait till they go home or wait till they're with their close friends. And I think, we're not here to, air out dirty laundry or talk about anything too nuanced, but for us to be able to have just a talk as believers about important things, I think it's awesome. So thank you guys for putting this on. This is awesome.
Of course.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. Earlier as Amy and I and Levy were planning for this podcast, we had a different name, and the whole idea was that we kind of talk about taboos. Now, it might not be the most appropriate word, which is probably why we didn't use it, but it's just stuff that most Christians might be afraid to talk about.
Wait, is there something? So when you said, giving a little background, this was almost called Taboo Talks.
Yes, it was.
What? is there something I don't know? Why is taboo such a bad word? Because we play it all the time at fellowships.
I mean, it's
And
That's a dad behind the camera.
and I looked it up. It literally said something that you don't want to talk in church when I Googled the word taboo.
I think we settled on the name on our first meeting, but then I mean, over time, as the name changed to Close on Sundays, I guess, yeah, and to some people, taboo has a more of a negative.
So I personally thought it had a more insidious undertone.
That's dark.
It is. It was a dark
Insidious.
undertone, and I did
That's a
not.
word.
It just didn't sit right with me. But when Levy read the definition for us, it made sense.
Yeah.
It did. And it fit right in. But something about it, I just didn't want it to go forward.
Yeah.
Something negative.
And I think what's really great is that in this case, and like Levy was saying, this is such an important thing to do. It's not the topics that, I'm sure you guys are going to be bringing to the table. It's not that Christians don't talk about these things.
Exactly.
But the point of having something like this, especially, as like a subsidiary of QPEM, as our church, like representing what we believe as a congregation in our membership, is that it's not that people don't talk about this, but a lot of times, especially younger people, they do talk about it. It's like the hot topic, but let's say it's kind of like the blind leading the blind, where everyone has a lot of ideas. And I think at the end of the day, we're very also inundated with culture. So dating is something that the culture in so many ways has a million things to say. So we have to understand that realistically, as a lot of our congregation members and Christians are living in this world, their view on these topics may naturally be more informed by society and culture, which we understand is hostile to God and hostile to Scripture. So for us to have this conversation, it's not that we have, all the answers to these things, but I think it's also us being able to identify that a lot of Christians are probably talking about this with good intention, but if all you do is talk about it and you're left with no instruction, or you're left with no, direction to God's word and wisdom, then it's kind of like, it's great you talked about it, but it's not really productive. And you're still lost. So I think in that way, we're not talking about taboos, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about very important things. And I think the Close on Sunday is I think it was a good call.
Yeah.
That's a great title. Yeah.
And I think it's much catchier.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, the whole goal definitely is to provide, not instruction, not prescriptions, but at least some insight, and provide a place where listeners, or even just us as friends, as members of a church who are unified in doctrine and teaching, at least how ought should we think about things, and hopefully I can provide good insight, and then also just little pizzazz, little anecdotes, and kind of have fun with it. So,
yeah, for sure. I didn't want it to be just like to do it for the sake of being at a shock factor, just to rile up reactions from people. That is not my intention.
Right.
But like you said, dating is such a mellow topic, yet it spans across all generations. We talked about it when we were 19. People are still talking about it.
It's true.
Like, we talked about it in high school, like in retreats, we would sit around and talk about it. I just think it is such a hot topic in the Christian community. And
can I ask, what is with the stereotype of women in their retreats? Also, because you guys are going on retreats soon.
We are.
Why is the number one question, what is your ideal type?
That is the hottest question. That is the question of the hour. What is our ideal type? We ask these questions, but it's really funny because I can say this now, after all these years, after talking about those topics, I don't think I followed my ideal type.
Hey, praise God, because Sam he's a man and a half.
Yeah.
Sam's pretty solid dude.
He is a
Great
solid
guy.
dude, and I really believe that God gives us what we need.
Oh, amen.
And he knows exactly what we need in our lives, and it doesn't matter what we can talk about it. I can be like, I want this X, Y, and Z, but ultimately it doesn't matter. And I think it's just a way for women and girls to just, have fun with it and kind of like be in that headspace, or maybe talk about things we can't have. I honestly don't know the psychology behind it.
Well, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
So, well, not that we have all the answers, but I think it's a It'll be a good discussion.
Yeah.
So why don't you kick it off then, Amy?
Oh, yes,
I know
okay.
we do have some sort of agenda,
Yes,
so
we
hopefully
do.
the people listening in will be able to follow.
Yeah, I want to just start off, dating in the Bible. So what does that look like? Why don't you, P-Reg, why don't you lead us into what dating in the Bible looks like?
Dating in the Bible. I feel like there's as I thought about this idea of dating, and I've dated in terms of we're talking about dating. I've dated for sure, and even before I got married to Hayan. But I feel like I'm big, as you guys know, as I help out at church and I'm pastoring young adults. You guys know I'm big on terms and defining terms. So before we ask dating in the Bible, I think we have to define what dating really is. So let me ask you guys, what in your mind, and I think that's another testament to why conversations like this are so important. If I were to ask each and every person in this room, what do you think dating is? Or more, let's say more focused, what is the goal of dating as a believer? I'm pretty sure our answers would be pretty, spread out and diverse. Hopefully we'll come to terms on like the main key things. But I think that's also when it comes to understanding as Christians, we live in this world. So even something like dating, we have a view of it. But even the good things that God gives to us, even in scripture, they become hijacked by the world. So the view that, maybe even people amongst our congregation has of dating might be a little bit skewed, right? So let's start there. Let me ask you guys, maybe we can start with P. Austin. What, when we say dating, what do you think of?
When I think of dating,
Are you dating?
Oh, yes. For context, I am dating.
This is hot. Get ready for it.
I am dating. My girlfriend's name is Jamie. We met when we were 19 and we were dating strong, 7 years, 8 years this year.
Wow.
And it's been and I guess I'll use that as context to how I define dating. It's a friendship. It's a partnership. Okay. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to seek, of course, the blessed gift that God has given in marriage, in hopes and in prayerfully that one day that person that you're committed to and committed back to is the one that God had really planned on you spending your life with. Okay. Right? To be together and to be the pair that that's so clearly found in God's design, even going back to the garden. What is man without woman and what is woman without man? That's how God has intended. So yeah, that for me, friendship and partnership and commitment those are the key words when I think about dating. Yeah.
All right, here's a real question for you.
Here comes the heat.
On a given Sunday, how many times does someone ask you when you're going to marry?
On a given Sunday? Oh, only like once or twice. Only once or twice.
That's not bad. That's still a lot for on a Sunday.
That's true. But I think what's helpful too is thankfully a lot of people know us. A lot of people know of our context and how we've been, what we've been through, but we're closer than ever for me getting on that one knee.
Wow.
That's when are you getting married?
You heard it here first.
Ooh, I hope.
Well, that wasn't the question. So
Let me reel it back.
How many times does someone ask you this on a Wednesday?
Yeah. I forgot.
Wednesday.
This is the first.
So this is one number one right here.
Yeah.
For me, I guess dating is looking and finding a partnership. I think partnership is a very, very big thing. Someone that you are loyal to, someone that you can do life with, kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I want to give the more like textbook Christian-y answer where like a man who will lead me into this life of Christ. But honestly, when I was that's how I feel right now after marriage. But I think when I was dating, that's not how I felt.
Sure.
I think initially I just wanted someone who understood me. Sure. Someone who would guide me.
Okay.
Yeah, and someone who could kind of be my rock when I couldn't be.
Right. Okay, I think, and this is where I think maybe that's why it's great we're starting with dating in the Bible, because I would say like a lot of the things you guys mentioned, let's say even like P. Austin saying like he's looking for a partnership. But I would go and say, well, I would say you don't have a partnership, because at the end of the day, you're not married, right? You're dating. So I think that's why, and again, that's not to, put anyone down, but it's understanding, well, first of all, I think language is super important, right? The terms we use.
Terminology is key.
Yeah, terminology is key. And like, we want to be able to define things correctly, right? So even when it comes to a friendship, absolutely, right? But you could be friends with people you don't date as well. And the funny thing is about that marriage is ultimately, it's built on best friendship, as we would say, right? But I think even like what you were saying, Amy, when you're looking for someone who will be your rock, right? Let's say that term exactly. And you said you're looking for that while you were dating, before you got married.
Yes.
But I would say actually that's probably why a lot of dating goes awry, because you're looking for someone to be your rock.
Yeah.
And if you're saying you want that person you marry to be your rock, that's fine. But a lot of times your boyfriend or girlfriend becomes your rock. And because there's no commitment, there's no covenant there, things fall apart.
The expectations kind of are falsely placed.
Right.
Right. In good intentions. But
Right. And I think that's ultimately why we have to define the terms, right? So I think, like going back to the question, dating in the Bible, when I, maybe to answer my own question, and when we talk about dating, essentially it's you having an intentional relationship. When we say relationship, I'm not talking about romantic. I'm saying just you being in relation to another person, a person of the opposite gender. It's you having an intentional relationship with this person to see if God is calling you to marry them, to enter into covenant with them, right? Now, when we think about dating in our modern day, we think, what's the first thing? Hinged, Coffee. We think dating apps, right? We live in a very technologically advanced world in that way. But I think going back to now, well, where's dating in the Bible? The simple answer, of course, we know is that it's not there, right? So, but again, when we think about the essence of dating, which is seeking godly marriage, it absolutely is there.
Yeah.
But when we think about the dating we see in today's day and age, which a lot of times comes out to like basically like test driving a car in a lot of ways, that is absolutely not in scripture, right? And I would say, if I could just give a scriptural example, I would say probably the best example of dating, or let's say the word we normally think of is courtship, right? Do you guys know like where the word dating even came from?
No.
Well, good thing I researched before we came, right? One of the first coined or like recorded uses of the word dating was actually not the way we use it, but it was actually, I read it somewhere where it was a young man in a newspaper column, and he was saying that he was frustrated that his girlfriend was preoccupied so many times in the week. So essentially, his girlfriend was taking up, her dates were all full, like her calendar was full, so he couldn't spend time with her, right? And then from there, think about like courtship. From what I looked up, one of the first examples of dating we find was in like it was in France with like the aristocracy. That's a fun word, right? And in order to keep the royal line going, they came up with a pool of people to get married, so it would continue that on. We have kind of semblances of that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so then in that way now, with courtship, the idea of being able to intentionally find someone to, cleave to and bring into your household, right? That's something we do see in the Bible, and we see it, I would say, in a beautiful way in Ruth and Boaz, right? That's a great example.
That's the first one I thought about.
Right, that's an example of not a, it's not a godly marriage. It turns into one where they also being, in the lineage of Christ, but it's an example of two people seeking to be married, and they do it according to the Lord, right? So I think in that way we absolutely see that there needs to be some intentionality where you start just as a neighbor, right? So right now, categorically, and I understand right now that I'm going on right now, so you guys can interject. Love you, of course. Please butt in. Right now, the four of us in this room, categorically, we are neighbors.
Yes.
Right? We are not spouses, right? We three of us have spouses waiting for us at home. Bless you, Hyan, as you're going to sleep right now. But we are neighbors. But we see in, let's say, Ruth and Boaz, that they go from being well, first they're strangers because
Yep.
Ruth is a Moabite, but then they become neighbors where she now lives in Bethlehem with Naomi, and she's now in his territory. And then as neighbors, there is an intentional step, right? You guys remember where, Naomi tells Ruth to, get all dolled up and to look pretty as she goes to meet Boaz, right? And all these different things. And then Boaz also, he expresses his desire to marry Ruth and be the kinsman redeemer, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a gradual, it's not just like you go from this to this.
Right.
There is a gradual process of saying, I want to explore if we can pursue this covenant of marriage together. And then now in doing so, there are definitely things to look out for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's my long-winded answer to dating in the Bible. It's there. It's not what we see now.
No.
But it's actually way more intentional. It's way more beautiful. And it's way more honoring because you're not just kind of, it's not just like one night stands and just trying people out and, things like that. Yeah.
And I think one thing that picked up, Purich, as you spoke was, what's the goal? What's the goal when you date? I think, younger or older, right? That goal may be completely different from what the Bible said it ought to be.
Absolutely.
Right? Christian and non-Christian alike. I think that's the really sad reality that, of course, there's probably so many people, even probably in our church, that with the right intention date, and sometimes it doesn't work out. They pursue that marriage with someone, but the also harsh reality is that many don't. Many don't. They don't have that goal in mind, where the one night stands aren't for, this could be my future wife or husband, but they're simply, no, it's just wanted to fulfill other desires, right?
Right.
So you say goal. So, okay, on the basis that we believe in, we're Christians, we believe in Jesus, what is the goal that you're hinting at?
Marriage.
Okay.
Right.
Just wanted to clarify. I knew that but
goal to marry, the goal to marry in covenant, that's missed.
Well, let me interject this then. I think this is where, we don't want to blur the lines and like you guys are saying, the word of the goals, because in the sense where the ultimate goal of dating is it should lead to marriage, right? Like we say all the time, you shouldn't date without considering marriage, because then, there's plenty of other ways to have fun and get to know people, right? But dating is like and the thing with dating in this day and age is that, some people who are dating do things that married people do, right? With sexual immorality and all these different things, even like cohabitation, like living together. So I think we definitely, this category of dating, and I think the words boyfriend and girlfriend have become, and there's a book that I always recommend to people, and it's a little orange book. It talks about how, like, even this term of boyfriend and girlfriend, it's like, remember those categories like stranger, neighbor, and spouse. A boyfriend is not, a boyfriend girlfriend is less than a spouse, but it kind of feels like it's a little bit more than a neighbor.
Yes.
Because you're not really friends. It's
right.
That's the term, we're not just friends.
Exactly.
But in the eyes of God, you are absolutely just friends. Which means you don't have the benefits of covenant, marriage and things like that. So I think, for Piasen's point, to answer Levy's question a little bit differently, the point of dating absolutely is to see if marriage is viable with this person, to see, can this person lead me? Can this person, for Amy, can this person protect me? Can this person guide me? Can this person provide for me, etc. But I think, and this comes from, John Piper, I remember reading this in college, the goal of dating should ultimately be clarity and clarity to marriage with that person. But then the goal of marriage should always be intimacy. But the problem with today is that we mix those things up, and people say the goal of dating is to be intimate. But that's why, friend groups are ruptured forever. People leave churches; they can't be at the same community because we mix. It's a mixed shot. It's a cocktail that you shouldn't make, right? So I think in that way, we would say that the goal of dating then is to find clarity with this person towards marriage. But then once you're in marriage, then it becomes intimacy, then it becomes romance, then it becomes a friendship.
So to clarify, is it possible as a Christian to have another goal outside of marriage in terms of dating?
Do you mean as a Christian?
As a Christian, is there? So, and I'm just trying to clarify. I know the answer.
Yeah.
To make sure we're all on the same page and everyone that's listening is on the same page.
Yeah.
You're a Christian. Can you have another goal outside of marriage when you're dating?
Amy, what do you think? another goal outside of marriage?
I think the wrong answer is yes. The wrong answer is yes. The right answer
Correct.
is no.
That's why she's
English is hard.
The right answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult because, you know, we're only human.
Sure.
We're all sinners.
Right.
And Christians can find themselves in a situation where you just want to have fun. You just want to close your eyes. You just want to kind of ignore who you are in that moment and your values and kind of just do the things that, you know, your flesh tells you to do.
Right.
So in saying that, I kind of wanted to ask, how do you know? So in a, you know, Christian-centered, God-centered dating situation, I don't believe that human feelings are reliable. I think humans are the most fickle human beings on earth, and I don't trust my own emotions.
Sure.
I don't trust. I just don't trust human emotions. I don't trust that to kind of guide me to where I am right now, and in that, I think a lot of young adults right now have a hard time because that's kind of all they go by. Their feelings. Their feelings. So what would you say to that? Like, what would you say to those people? Be like, hey, like, what am I looking for?
Yeah.
Or what guideline do I use?
Right.
Or what standards do I, you know, go by?
Yeah. That's a great question. Piasa, what do you think? Let's like make the question more simple. What are you looking for?
What are you looking for?
When you're dating, what should you be looking for? And you can share what you
with context for me, you know, hello, how are you? I'm trying to answer a question here. What's your dog's name?
Tofu.
You have to exercise dominion over the creature.
At least Tofu's cute, so it's okay.
Oh yeah, she'll be walking around.
What should we look for? Man, it's, you know, there's an easy Christianese answers, right? A good faith, you know, someone.
You know, it's funny you say that because for me, it was so easy for me to know that Sam was going to be my partner because of how much of a godly man he was.
Sure.
Like just growing up, my family didn't really pray during meal times.
Okay.
Like I was, you know, born in the church. You know, I was a Christian from birth, but for some reason we didn't really pray during mealtime. I don't know, maybe it was awkward, maybe it just, we lost it in the way. But when Sam ate dinner for the first time with my family, he prayed for us.
Wow.
He prayed for us, and I think that kind of won my parents over as well in that moment where he was like, for him it wasn't that big of a deal, and it was just a given to him. But for us, we were like, oh, he's praying for us. He's praying for us before a meal. Like just a simple gesture like that. It was so obvious to me that this was going to be my partner.
Sure. Yeah, and I think with that, I think when we talk, because you know we do want to give something more practical.
Yeah.
We're not just anecdotal, and I think your anecdote is a proof of really the principle.
Yes.
And I think there is a principle that Scripture gives us in what should you look for in your future spouse, right? Besides the obvious things about like, you know, one man and one woman and you know, monogamous relationship, etc. I think like if we could go back to Scripture, we think about Ruth and Boaz. As I was thinking about the text, and it's something we went through Bible study recently in our church, when Ruth comes to Boaz in chapter 2, the one thing that strikes Boaz and really makes Ruth attractive in his eyes is her godliness, right? It's her commitment to Yahweh. And, you know, and we all know, and the reader knows, and Boaz knows, and he asks, you know, who is this woman? And it's Ruth the Moabite. She's not a member of the covenant. And yet the three things that really stick out to Boaz, which I think would be my answer to this question, is that she is committed to God first and foremost. As a kind of as a natural overflow of her commitment to God, she's also committed to her family. And then lastly, she's committed to the people of God. And that is the trifecta. That is like essentially what I think. And for Boaz, you know, he was a rich, affluent man. He was older per se, but he's a rich, affluent man, especially in a, you know, in a society where the men are kind of the ones like running society, except in the patriarchal society. He has everything in his corner. And yet what his heart is tuned for, and as he is now looking for a partner too, or maybe he wasn't, but you know, it's that at last moment like we see in the garden, his eyes and his ears and his heart are not tuned to just physical vanity, even though those things are important as well. But the main three things are that this person is committed to Yahweh, committed to God. They're also committed to their family, committed to the ones that they're with. That's another important thing to think about too. Like the whole idea of modern singleness is that when you're singleness, your life is insignificant because you're alone. But biblically, being single doesn't mean you're alone. Because you have your family and you have your church. It just means you're not married. Right? So in that sense, for Ruth as a single woman at the time, she is committed to her family, to Naomi, right, in a beautiful way. And then she's also committed to her people, where she says, your people will be my people. Right? So I think that's biblically, that's what we should be looking for. And I hope, and you know, for Pias as he's dating, and then for the three of us as we're married, that really is like what we're able to say we saw, and that's kind of what we catches our eye. Not only catches our eye, but it makes your heart flutter. You realize like this is someone that I can spend the rest of my life with.
Okay. Yeah. No.
What's
that's
interesting
awesome.
to me with Ruth, particularly if you just go back to the scriptures, that like those three things: committed to God, committed to her family, committed to the people. Well, in culturally, that's not her God ethnically, right? She's not an Israelite. Two, it's not her mother. It's her mother-in-law.
Right.
And she's committed to her.
Right.
And then she says, oh, I'm not just committed to my people. She says to Boaz, your people will be my people.
Right.
And it's a hard task, yet a beautiful image of, man, this is what caught Boaz's eye. And in God's you know, grand planning, using them to do something even greater later. Just in that moment, as we focus there, Boaz finds his one. If we want to use the terminology of today, right? Your one, the one that you're going to be with for the rest of forever, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great image, and thanks P. Rich for that great, almost case study example of like kind of provides so much.
You know, Boaz and Ruth are sinners, as we all are.
Yep.
But you know, the scripture gives us wonderful examples, and we see ultimately that their faithfulness to God first not only, you know, nets them a partner, spouse, right, forever, but they're blessed beyond belief. They're in the lineage of Jesus Christ, right? So I think ultimately that's kind of at least the principle we should follow for dating, that if we are looking for these characteristics that really are the most important thing. We won't even have time to talk about physical attraction, preferences, things like that. Those are all important because a person is not just their spirituality.
Right.
A person is also their flesh, right? We're physical and we're spiritual beings. But I think the principle we should take away is there is that base. Like there are those things we should look for. I think another thing with Boaz too is like, one thing about Boaz that's so great is he cares so much about Ruth's reputation as well. He cares for Ruth's mother-in-law, even though, you know, in that sense, like he has no obligation in that way. And Boaz also is a man of great stature. He cares about his reputation amongst the community as well. So I think, you know, for anyone who is, you know, trying to date or you're thinking about dating, the book of Ruth is a great place to go. You know, obviously we, in a lot of ways, won't measure up, but there are a lot of great principles to be extracted there. So yeah. We could go on forever. So maybe you could push the next question.
So this is a hot one. I actually didn't know if we were going to get here, but I think this actually is the perfect segue to this topic. So, what are your thoughts on a Christian dating a non-believer?
Well done.
Ooh, hot topic.
This is the 5th out of 6 bullet points, but I guess we can just get there.
Well, I mean, I feel like the 3rd bullet points we can kind of sprinkle.
You're right.
Oh, okay.
No, it's good. It's a good. I mean, you know, what do you guys think? I mean, I'm sure let's say firstly, I'm sure you guys know people who are dating non-believers, right? Yeah. Even if I think right now there's a bunch of people that come to mind. So obviously, and I will say, this is why I'm here. These people are all amazing and lovely, but I'm here because as a podcast we're putting out, from QPEM, this isn't like a personal venture per se. Yeah. We're doing this as a church, and we're doing this to bless, first and foremost, our members, and then anyone else who's listening in. The views that at least I will share, and I believe we all agree with, are the views of QPEM. These are the views that are expressed in our membership class. If anyone is ever able to take it, we're confessional, we're a Reformed church. So I do want to say that, this is not to, we bind people's conscience only as far as the word of God takes us. So, but in terms of the nuances and stuff, that's why we're here to talk about these things, which we don't talk about on Sundays, I guess. So, yeah.
Closed on Sundays.
You need a jingle.
Chick-fil-A sponsor us. But they're closed on Sunday. But, Piazza, why don't you start first? And I think, can I just say this for the sake of our listeners, where they're, they get the lofty church talk, like the high and lofty church talk most of the time. I think, what will be helpful for us, especially for me and you, is like maybe especially where we went to school, I think just like simplifying things. I'm always a big fan of like, I've always been told to explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. So let's, it's about simplifying it because that's the way we communicate best. You know what I mean? So why don't we start there?
We do have a tendency to use big words and
but we're both children's pastors.
You
still are.
I'm still a children's pastor.
I was for a long time.
I'm literally talking to 8-year-olds every week. Saying this is what it is. Anyway, so dating a non-Christian, a Christian dating a non-Christian. Did we say particular question? Like, did we say? Is it
what are
okay?
your thoughts on it? Just
my thoughts on it.
We're just going organic here.
We're going for it. Man, this may be a hot topic,
right?
Of course. May be, right? But to me, it's not. To me, it's not a hot topic. To me, it's not a hot take. It's hard when a believer, knowing the covenant of God, knowing what God has called for to the believer, not in a boxy boundary, but in an honoring, glorifying way as a believing person, dating a non-Christian, I will go back to P. Rich, what he said, right? What's the trifecta almost that creates maybe this even principle for dating? What should we seek for? If the first thing is a commitment to the Lord, it's already scratched off. It's already scratched off. And what I also love what P. Rich said too, that the next two things, commitment to family and people. Sure, there are a bunch of non-Christians who are, of course, great and humble and virtuous, and I'm sure they love their family. They're probably better family guys than some of us, right? Or who are more charitable or loving. Yet the source of that is from the Lord. It's in the faith given to us by God.
So what do you say to the people that are like, I could evangelize them? That's my way of evangelizing to them.
Man.
What's the term?
Missionary dating.
No, there's another term. People are saying like
flirt to convert.
There you go.
Flirt to convert.
What do you say to that?
Flirt to convert.
I didn't know that was a thing.
It's not a good jingle.
Is that
new podcast?
I
cannot be on it. I love my wife.
I'm resigning.
Yes. Well, I think to answer that question, again, we have to be able, even the, Levy's question is great because it kind of, if you're not thinking about it, it'll trap you. What do you say to people who flirt to convert? But then then we're in the sphere of evangelism. Then we're in the sphere of salvation and the sovereignty of God. And that's where I think it's easy to make things oversimplified. In a lot of ways, it's because it takes away from the issues at hand, right?
Flirting to convert is almost, it's too far. It's dumbing down things way too far, where you're putting yourself, let's say this person who's flirting to convert, you're putting yourself in a position where, you have no say whether that person is a saved person or not.
Absolutely.
And I will say from personal stories, one of my closest friends started dating someone, and he grew up in the church. I know he's a professing Christian, and the person he started dating was not. Yet oddly, that his girlfriend, now fiance, was eventually baptized. He's a professing Christian today. So I'm not. It's hard to say that don't do it, never do it, right? I think it comes down to a kind of a thought of wisdom. And I tell him, brother, you are so blessed that now as you have been growing and seeking into looking into marriage, which I'm not there yet you can say that your wife is not just going to some city hall guy, yet they can be in front of someone and before the Lord and entering this covenant of marriage. So so
quick question about your friend, because I just came to this conclusion as you guys were or as you were talking about it. How were you, so you're a friend that dated a non-Christian, were you there for him? Or like were all your friends
the whole time?
The whole time?
Yeah.
So one thing I just realized is that, so we have an instance in our church where they were going to get married, not a Christian getting married to a non-Christian, and by the grace of God, he got saved probably, I don't know, within the window, week he was supposed to get married. So that was awesome in itself. But what the common denominator, at least from those two instances, is that the church was there for them in the walking of the dating life. And if there's any instance I could think of people, non-Christians and Christians dating, it's usually when, like, you know, I guess Christians would walk away from the church and kind of just do their own thing,
right?
You know, and that's the one thing I realized just now is that, well, that's why it doesn't work, is when the church isn't there for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say, and I think this is where it'll be helpful to kind of, and I think this is a beautiful thing. I've been at QPEM a little over 2 years, and I would say the Lord has really refined and sanctified our church, especially through our membership class that we introduced like a year into the time I was there. And you know, and I want to share this because it comes straight out of our membership. You know, the three of you guys, obviously, you know, Pastor Austin's a part of the KM side of our church, but the three of us, including me, we are, you know, covenant signing, affirming members of QPEM. And recently, and we shared in the membership and one of our congregational meetings that we've had a revision to one of our church distinctives on marriage. And I want to share that here. You know, we affirm that God has created marriage to unite one man and one woman. We live in a day and age where that will send people through the roof, right?
That's already
canceled already.
Canceled already. Yeah. Now, and I'll be home next week, all right? I'll be home before 9. But one man, one woman to enjoy a monogamous and permanent relationship, right? We have distinctives in our church with about divorce and grounds for those things, but we're talking about marriage. The next thing we say, that this is a new revision we've added, and I'm very glad and I'm very proud to be a member of QPEM, because especially in our day and age, you know, I was a seminarian, you know, P. Austin recently graduated too. We live in a day and age where even seminaries are folding on these topics, and seminaries are supposed to be these bastions of truth in our world.
Right.
And in many ways, you know, I tell people, I feel like the amount of good seminaries in the States alone, I could probably count on one hand. Yeah. And that is really sad to say. But recently we added this revision that we affirm that it is the duty of Christians to marry only in the Lord. Via 1 Corinthians 7:39, also the Westminster Confession of Faith, Article 24, and should not marry those who are not in the faith. Of course, the big passage we refer to is 2 Corinthians 6:14-18. And I guess to Levy's question, you know, were you there for the church? Let me share something. If you guys were not aware, we added this into our membership class. If you're listening, you're taking our membership class, you will be hearing this. That based on our biblical convictions on the theology of marriage in Scripture, along with our adherence to the Westminster Confession of Faith and our denomination's Book of Church Order, QPEM, we will only officiate weddings between believers at our church. That is a new revision that we added. And that does not mean that, to Levy's point, that if you choose to marry or even date a non-believer, that we will exile you and never let you come into the doors of the chapel. It doesn't mean that we'll spite you and spread rumors about you. But when it comes to it, for us as a church to now officiate that marriage, it would now bring us into sin. And we would be in hostility to the word of God. And that's something we're not willing to do. Yeah.
This is how I look at it. That's news to me. I'm very happy that is part of it.
Okay.
But
that's awesome.
This is how I look at it. If we really care for this brother or sister that is dating a non-Christian,
right,
how much more should we be there for them and make sure and walk with them and make sure they're making that right decision?
Exactly. And I think the question, even we talking about defining terms, what does it really mean to care?
Yeah.
Today in day and age, when we say, a lot of times people equate caring for someone as affirming them when they're delusional, right? Or they're
just
doing
supporting
something.
Whatever they're doing.
It's like, and I think Pastor Peter, I remember we were talking about it, and he said it best, like, if for him as a father, if his if Caleb or Luke or Sailor, they're doing something that's hurting them, something that's going to hurt them in the long run, something that's going to be detrimental to their life and their faith, how could he ever in his right mind sit there and say to them straight face that, sure, go ahead and do it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what it comes down to as well. To give more of a simple answer or a biblical answer for us, the reason why, Amy's asking the thoughts on it. I'll put it simply for us here. A believer may not marry an unbeliever. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
Pastor said it's not a controversial take. It's only controversial because we say this all the time, especially in our small groups. There's truth that's hard to understand, and then there's truth that's hard to swallow.
Yeah.
Right.
Most people understand this. It's just that they don't accept it for many different reasons, right? So then, and by relation to that, if biblically you are prohibited from marrying a non-believer, therefore, we would say that you have absolutely no reason to date a non-believer.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, right? Let's say, like Ollie grows up and he falls in love with the iPad and Levy says, Ollie, no iPad tonight. Then he would have no reason to pick up that iPad because he ain't playing that iPad tonight. He's not watching YouTube, right? In the same way, if the overarching principle is that you can't marry a non-believer because it's sin.
Right.
We understand that it's sin in 2 Corinthians. I'll talk about that right after this. Excuse me, the seltzers.
Yeah.
Gas City out here.
Gas City.
Sorry about that. But then in the same way, then to date a non-believer, maybe I'm sure people can mince words and say, okay, but is it sin? And I've heard that recently, saying, well, okay, and I've heard this a lot. Okay, marrying a non-believer as a believer is sin. But then is dating a non-believer sin? Or is it unwise? But then for us, we'd say, would you do either? Are you supposed to do either? And I don't want to make light of this because again, I understand, and I'll get to that at the end of my little TED talk here about how God can still redeem. Levy brought it up in our church. We had people who dated non-believer at the time. That just because they ended up becoming a believer, that's attributed to God's mercy, not to that person's wisdom to date that person. But the 2 Corinthians passage about why it's giving the basis for believers and non-believers to not get married is it talks about yokes, right? You guys know what yokes are? And I'm not going to make the corny joke about.
I don't actually.
Show us.
Get some eggs out. Yokes. It's an agricultural tool, right? And it's when Jesus
I didn't know that.
It's when Jesus says in Matthew 11 that his yoke is easy, right, and his burden is light.
Oh.
So then the yoke was attached to two usually beasts like oxen, and essentially they would be yoked together. So let's say like me and Pias and we're facing the same direction. There's a big wooden beam that locks us together, and then we're attached to a plow. So then we would work together and move in the same direction and move that plow across the field, and we would do our work. So then now that's the word that the Apostle Paul uses to not be yoked, right? To not be unequally yoked. So essentially, if you are a believer and your Lord and Master is Jesus Christ, and you marry a non-believer whose Lord and Master is everything but Jesus Christ, and you become yoked in marriage, what's going to end up happening? You're going to pull in the opposite direction. You can't move forward, right? Here's a good way to put it too. What if you put Jesus and Satan in a yoke? Would that ever work?
No.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
They will never move in the same direction.
Never.
And essentially what Paul is saying is that and I'm not saying that a non-believer is Satan. That's not the equation I'm making. But essentially we belong as Christians to the kingdom of Christ and the kingdom of light. And for non-believers, they are still in Adam in the kingdom of darkness. So that's what it means. If you're yoked, you will ultimately worship two different things. For you, it will be God. Right. For your spouse, it will not be God, and it will never be God unless God saves them. And this is something I heard recently that I think is really, and I'm sure maybe we can relate to this. What happens then if you have two partners who are married and there's a believer and non-believer and you worship different things? Two things will happen. I, as a spouse, will either do two things. One, I will put God first, as I should. And then what happens? I alienate my spouse. I push my spouse away, right? And then my spouse feels second, which they shouldn't. That's your spouse, right? But then on the other hand, if you try to make it work with your spouse, snoring dog in the background, when you put your spouse first, you will ultimately compromise your faith.
Yeah.
So you'll put God second.
I see.
And then you run into this dilemma where it will naturally pour out into your children, your family, your kids, your grandchildren, which will naturally affect your church, which will affect your community, et cetera, et cetera.
And I want to go back to that kind of the double question you had. Is it sin or is it simply unwise? But then, as Pierce has explained so well, this is not simply a judgment call. This affects so much that yes, sin's involved, and yes, a lack of wisdom is involved.
Yeah.
Just because we say something is unwise does not make it any less, punishable, not punishable, just less consequences to it.
Exactly.
Less effects down the road.
And it's the wrong question.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you're in a relationship, you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, you're trying to get a little frisky, and you ask your pastor, P. Rich, how far can we go? You're already asking the wrong question, right? How much can I sin without the consequences really hitting me too hard?
How much can I sin?
That's essentially what it is. So even that question of, is it a sin? Well, I will say confidently, it is a sin to marry someone who's not in the Lord, and therefore dating someone who's not in the Lord, if you are in your conscience trying to live your life in practical godliness, obedient to God, I would say that you don't even have to ask the question, is it a sin? I would say by connection, it absolutely is something you should avoid. Right. And that's the thing with boundaries sometimes too. We pretend like boundaries, like fences, are something that you feel like you want to see how close you can get. But the point of the boundary is to say, just don't go anywhere near that.
Right.
But that's kind of the way we treat it sometimes. So I would say in that way, but I'll end with this nuance here, to Levy's point, and if we're being practical, and again, I don't want to sound so insensitive. Like, we have friends, and I have friends who are dating non-believers. I've had friends who've dated non-believers and they've since departed the faith. And that's when we see that that's how the yoke is so destructive, that it will pull in so many different directions. But can God redeem past mistakes? We are all testaments to that fact that he can, right? So if you are dating a non-believer willingly, and can he convert a non-believer and create a healthy family? He raised Christ from the dead. God can do anything, right? Has he done that? Levy pointed out in our church, he has. But is that a reason for us to go and seek something that God has explicitly forbidden in his word? Absolutely not. And I want to leave it at that.
I do want to lead into, if anyone that's been listening to this whole thing, don't just listen to the last 2 minutes that you just spoke about, because I feel like that's the only thing they'll get out of it. It's like, so it is possible.
Exactly.
like overall, you know, what the whole message that you're saying is very correct. So don't just take the last 2 minutes of this.
So I have a quick question, actually. So as a friend, how do we support those?
That's a great question.
Who are in that kind of relationship? Because for me, I don't ever want to be a bad friend or a friend that tells someone what to do or whatever. All I can do is encourage them gently. It's like the whole gentle parenting thing. It's just like kind of guide them, encourage them, and kind of feel it out sometimes. You want to come. I mean, Easter just passed, but you want to come on Easter. I know it's a big thing. You want to come on Christmas. Kind of ease them in. Kind of encourage. I feel like encourage is the biggest thing I can do. But, what would you say to people who are asking, how can I support them? How can I help them in any way, shape, or form?
And to kind of respond to what you said, Amy, like, I don't think telling your friend what they should do is being a bad friend. I can see, of course see why. Right? I can see why it's maybe seen like that today. But if a friend is someone someone dear to you, someone you care for, as, of course, in a much smaller way as a father cares for the children, as friends, we're not supposed to take care of one another. And encouraging or approving or blindly approving, isn't that then hurting your friend? It's tough. It's tough to scold anyone.
I think that just goes against my personal personality. I would never want I'm the kind of person, if someone tells me what to do, I will do exactly the opposite. Like, no one.
That's a you problem.
Yeah, it's a me problem.
We told her to not make a podcast.
Yeah.
And then
So
now
no
we're
one in my
here we
life
are.
who is wise enough ever tells me what to do. So
I'll remember that, Amy. As a pastor,
Yep.
over you, I will remember that.
As a friend and a parent mentor, yeah, I'll remember that too.
So I guess that kind of just translates to, you know, my loved ones as well.
Sure.
I'm just like, if I don't ever want to be told what to do,
Right.
why would I ever tell anyone what to do?
Right.
So, I mean, I guess that just comes from my personal personality.
Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with our culture, right? We live in a day and age where if you tell someone what they should be, it's like oppressive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And I think I think that's something especially young people need to understand. And I'm young. Okay. So categorically, I'm the same place. I think that's something not even young, just old. Like the worldviews that dominate our culture, they have seeped into not only our personal lives, but they've also just seeped into the church. They've seeped into the way people parent. Like we live in a day and age where like kids run households.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And, even to just bring things a little bit more, specifically, like we live in a day and age where kids are now telling their parents who they are. Kids say, no, I'm a boy, even though they're biologically a girl. And now and then we see parents like going on affirming that. Again, I'm not saying that's easy to be able to tell them, and tell them the truth. It's something that, I hope by the grace of God, I never have to really go through.
Right.
But I think it's something where we have to understand that even the way that, like you're saying, you view, how do I love this person the best? I think the question we always have to ask ourselves is, but what is love? How does God define love? And I would say for me, the people who love me the most are the ones who tell me what I need to hear. Are the people who don't want to see me be a bad father in a few months, who don't want to see me be a terrible husband to my wife. Those are the people where I know they actually care. Not that other people don't, but that for them, we're on another level in that sense. So, to answer your question more simply, I'll give you the rule and then also maybe the wisdom of it. How do you care for someone who's, let's say, dating a non-believer? I think you care for them in two ways. First, you honor God by standing firm on your convictions about the fact that you should not be dating someone who's not a believer, because essentially if that, and to be honest, let's even think about the attachment. Most, I'm sure, like people like under, 30 or young, they're very sexually active, even though they're dating, even though it's not biblical and it's sin. So then that attachment is growing, the intimacy is growing, things like, I always tell like younger people too, like even things like being on FaceTime all the time, texting all the time, it creates a false sense of intimacy, right? How many people do you guys know where you text them like OD, you text them a lot, but when you're standing in front of them, it's like, you don't know what to say, because there's a sense of, the screen creates like this false intimacy. So then kind of bringing that back, what happens is like, you're going along that line. Let's say you're dating and they're dating and you want to tell them those things. First, it starts with standing firm in what you believe is God's design, what pleases God, what honors God. And then being able to still be there for them at any time. So here, I'll give you a practical way. Let's say middle of the night, they got into a fight and they need someone. You're there for them.
Right.
You don't by any means cave and change your opinion, but you're there for them. You don't lord it over them. You don't say I told you so, but you are able to still be there for them like you would be for someone you really care about, because that is someone. But then, and I think that's a simple answer, like you stand firm on your truth, that the truth that God gives us in scripture, but you're also there for them. And that's a principle I try to live by, where I know a lot of people aren't going to be there for me, but as a pastor, my promise is I will be there for you, and in that case, like my friends who kind of break away or they don't want to go with the route that I want them to go in, or I want to go with them, then it's like I know they're not going to be there for me, but you come in the middle of the night, you need me, I'll be there for you. I think that's a great way. But I think here's another principle that I think maybe will go really against what you're saying, Amen. I want to challenge you in this. I think something that we need more in this day and age is being able to, proverbially, right? They say like rather than stab someone in the back, stab them in the front, right? And I think that's a question I always ask brothers and sisters and Christians when they come to like that impasse where it's like, if I say this, I think that person is never going to want to be with me again, or they're not going to want to be friends. And what I always challenge them is, would you be willing, if you knew that it would deter them from really, really dishonoring God, and going down a path that's going to be so hard to come back from. It's going to be filled with hurt and pain. Would you be willing for that person to hate you forever if it means that you could say what you need to say and potentially be able to deter them from that life of pain and suffering? Do you care about them more than just your peace that you have with that person? You know what I mean?
I think ultimately if that guaranteed something, then yes.
Of
but
course.
Obviously,
of course,
that's
where it's hard.
It's a risk.
Yeah. Of course, it's a risk.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm a big risk calculator,
and that's fair. And I do want to say, and this we can close up with this on this topic, is that I'm not saying that that's the wisdom you should employ every single time, because then you're gonna be burning bridges left and right.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely not. But I think ultimately, the question that answers is, what really is your definition of love? Is love just allowing someone to keep hurting themselves? Imagine like Sam was doing something really detrimental to his health, and he loved doing it, but you knew that it would, maybe he'd like get really sick in 10 years and like not be able to live and see your kids and raise your kids. Would you say, well, he wants to do it, I don't want to get on his bad side, so yeah, go ahead? Of course not. And even though it would cause strife, ultimately loving someone, and I think the definition of love that comes from the scripture is loving someone is not just appeasing them or making them feel good about themselves. Loving someone is doing what is best for the sake of the beloved. And you have to know that, especially if it's someone you claim to love. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of where I'd challenge you, Amy, and for all of us to be able to say, yeah, walk with them, yeah, be there for them, but compromising your truth is actually very unloving, because then they don't have really anyone to depend on. And then beyond that, being able to know when you need to put everything on the line for them.
No, that's interesting to hear. For sure.
It's tough. It's not easy, for sure. And
that's the thing. Again, listeners who are here, it's not a lot of this stuff we said today. A lot of the
all our topics on Closed on Sundays.
A lot of our suggestions or principles or wisdom statements, they're hard. They're hard to do. They're hard to live. And even the best of us still fail to take our own advice. I think an easy thing for you and me, P. Rich, is like, it's hard to be the pastor who doesn't even listen to their own sermons.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's, how could one... Maybe some people can say, how could you write this sermon when you don't even live that? And it hurts. It's a lot of truths, a lot of things that are so abundantly clear in the word. That is just really hard to really live by. And when it comes down to something like that, where how do I be a good friend, or how do I be loving? There's a clear answer, but it is hard. And
that's why we ultimately trust in the sovereignty of God, and we rely on the mercy of God, and we know that God loves these people way more than we love them. And I think the older we get, I'm sure we all can speak to, the older we get and the more our friend circles start to tighten, we become grateful that God has been merciful to us in these ways. Love, you had something?
No, I just wanted to say, I think we can talk about this forever.
This is true. We could.
Forever.
Should we jump to the next topic real quick?
Yeah.
Or do we have time?
Well, we're on the last
We have as much time. I mean, Oliver's already sleeping, so.
This is true.
It's fine.
Ryan just texted me how we're doing, so. Why don't we go to, we can go to the last one and pivot around if we need to, but.
For sure. So the last thing I wanted to kind of touch upon is church hopping to find a partner. Or, I guess I could rephrase that, or churching within your community, dating within your community, dating within your church. So there's a lot of drama that can happen. I've seen it happen. So yeah, just thoughts about that.
It's a good one. Levy, let me ask you, when you were dating Benita, were you guys like in the same friend group, in the same community?
Sorry, repeat the question. I was checking the camera.
When you started dating Benita, were you like in the same friend group, in the same community, or was she someone like you knew from afar or didn't know?
No, we actually were good friends. We hung out a lot. We got to know each other before that, a decent amount. Not obviously, we got to know each other more when we started dating. But yeah, that's how we met. We met at our previous church. We hung out a lot, went to missions together, and from there we started dating.
For sure.
Yeah.
Did you have any fears? And I feel like this is very typical, like any fear of like, oh, I like this person, I want to go for it, but I'm scared that if things don't work out, then things will be weird, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so that was the question you asked. I was checking the camera, so it was about leaving the church.
Yeah. So regarding that,
Okay.
So I asked that because really quickly because
Hi, Sam.
Oh, Sam's here.
Hi, Sam.
Sam's back
The
from
man of
Falcon.
God has entered the chat.
The man
Hello,
of God.
sir. Hope you had a good small
man who
Yeah,
prays.
so funny enough, Sam and I we were all in the same friend group, and there was an instance where we broke up for a hot sec, and that caused a lot of drama. It was a lot of drama.
Team Amy, Team Sam, right? That
Yes.
happened.
Team Sam.
Did you guys leave
Let's just say,
Did you guys leave the church?
no, we didn't leave the church, but let's just say everyone liked Sam like a 1% more than they liked me.
Did you confirm this with people? Show what percentage you're feeling towards me right now.
So, and then when we got back together, there was a lot of people actually against us going back together.
Interesting.
Because
Haha, you're married now.
I know, I was like, well, look at that now. Yeah, there was a lot of people against us. There was a lot of negative emotions.
Sure.
Be like, oh, like you could break up our friend group again. You're gonna cause
I
drama
see.
again.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that, and I'm not gonna lie, it did affect me.
Right.
And it did make me second guess, be like, hey, like, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's the question then, because we know that, I feel, off camera, Levy was talking about it earlier and saying, you hear the typical, oh, I can never date this person in my church. They're like a brother to me, or I grew up with them. And
It's just an excuse.
yeah,
That's an excuse.
yeah, Levy has some
Yeah.
strong feelings against it. Well, as do I, and I prepared to talk about that as well. But I think a first question we can ask is, why is that the case? Is that always the way dating has to go? Where if things don't work out, then your friend group gets decimated. Also, the simple question, does that mean if you don't work out that you guys can't be friends anymore?
Yeah.
And I think to get to that, we have to even just understand, why does it happen? Because that's the dominant trend a lot of times. Like, people just can't go on dates. And today in our day and age, we're seeing dates become super casual, right? Just going out. Like, I know people who go on like 3 dates in one night. Whether you're trying to get a meal or just actually just get to know 3 people in one night, which is kind of crazy to me. But
Socially, wow.
Is that a sin, just trying to get a meal to date?
Is it a sin? I'm trying to think of like a Bible verse.
Because that was a question before, and I'm just like, well, that's actually a good reason.
Oh no, that's definitely
under frauding,
I think that might be some form of theft. Maybe.
Yeah, theft.
You have no
Is that
intention.
fraud?
But what if
Fraud?
you agree to pay it?
That's true. I have not prepared for this question, so I will not say anything.
Got him.
I'll definitely say that. I guess to make it more broad, that is not a good reason to date, to just get a free meal. If you need a free meal, ask Pastor Austin. But I would say
You don't even have to
I
date
need
them.
the free meals. Come on now.
No, you do not have to date. He's already dated. But I think, to that question, like, why is it that way? And I think the answer is because the way people date is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's as simple as that. If you date in a way, and this is obviously where it's like, oh, but I wish the Bible would be more clear on these things. We have wisdom. Yeah. We have, and not only we have wisdom, and biblically, we also have godly couples who definitely weren't perfect in their dating. I definitely was not, but gained wisdom, especially through mistakes. Like, that's one big thing. As you guys know, with young adult community, I got rid of the college ministry on my second day of work. And my big big reason is because, like, why learn from making your own mistakes? Why don't you just learn from other people's mistakes?
Yeah.
Right? And I hear this all the time. Like, you can learn to swim by drowning, or you can learn to swim by learning how to swim from people who know how to swim, right? So I think when it comes to the problem with like the friendships and things that kind of self-destruct is because you date in a way where you become more intimate than you actually should be, right? So then it's like, after you guys get intimate, let's say it's even a month, right? Let's say for, when it gets worse, let's say 2 years, and there's a lot of sexual intimacy. There's a lot of just like that addictive quality where like you're each other's world. And that's something, I recently was talking about, and I think this will be a good anecdote too. I was speaking with someone recently who's recently kind of gotten out of a relationship that it was something where it was a big part of their life. And for myself too, I was in a relationship for a couple of years, going into my last relationship that ended in my marriage with Hyan. But not only is there the spiritual aspect where maybe you came to idolize this person, or you idolize what they gave you or how they made you felt, but also there's a very human perspective where when you spend so much time with someone and then that person's gone from your life, you have a void that's way more than just spiritual.
Oh yeah.
It's actually it's like
Deeply
habitual.
emotional.
It's deeply emotional, but what I'm trying to say is it's actually more simple than that. It's just habit. Like if you're in the habit of talking to someone 3-4 hours a day, and then now because of something that happened, you can never talk to them again. You will naturally spend those hours thinking about that person. And it's not something where we should just say, hey, stop idolizing that person. It's actually something more like, hey, this is just a habit you have. And if this was your wife, this would have been great because you should be thinking about your spouse as well. But because it was someone who's not your spouse, now you have to replace that time and find a new habit to replace it with. It's not just always a spiritual thing. It's also we are creatures of habit as well. So I think with the dating thing in that way, it gets dicey. But I do think that people date in a way where, and we talked about this already, where you are far more than you should be. So then when you try to go back to being friends, you can't. But it's like, well, obviously it's because you guys have experienced way more than you were permitted to experience.
Right.
It's way harder to go back than it is to go forward, right? Yeah.
And a lot of relationships nowadays it's just imitating marriage.
Right.
Marriage unintentionally just becomes that ceremony day where you put on the rings, because all that is yet to discover, that should be discovered later, has been discovered.
Yeah.
Then the breakup happens. And you're like, wait, I put all my chips in.
Right.
All my chips in. Emotionally, physically, mentally, habitually.
Right.
Everything. And now it's gone.
Right.
How could you go back?
Yeah. And the beauty of that is if you did that with the person that God has literally made you for, that's the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
You have a secret bond with one person that no one else in the world has with them or with you. And I think that's something, as we're 3 married people, we can attest to that. That's one of the beauties of marriage. We enjoy a secret intimacy that no one in this world will ever know with a sole person. Like, and it's not just inside jokes. It's not just memories. There's a part of you when you look at that person, your spouse, no one else feels the same way you ever will feel. Even when you are annoyed at them, no one will feel annoyed in the same way, where it's like you're fighting the urge, like you want to, come down on them and stuff, but it's like you love them deep in your heart. So I think in that way, that's kind of really the issue that comes to play, why friend groups kind of have to, and I think after every breakup, it's going to be emotional. But the simple thing is, the more you tie yourself to someone intimately and emotionally, when categorically you're still just neighbors, when you break off that bond, you're going to realize that you went way too far and now things will never be the same. So you can't even sit in the same room together. And I think that's the issue. The root problem is that we date incorrectly. And maybe a follow-up question would be, then what's the correct way to date? The simple way would just be, just go and get to know someone. That's why, and I say it all the time, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but let's say someone in our church, I'm not gonna drop any names, but let's say a guy and a girl, and I hear like, what'd you do yesterday? Oh, I went out to get dinner with this person, this sister. Like, oh, you went on a date? Like, no, it's not a date. I just went to catch up. Like, but here's my thing. Here's where I press them. I say, oh, so you intentionally spent time getting to know this other person. And I would say, okay, obviously, if it's with someone who's married, I'm not going to say it's a date. But you know what I mean? If it's like someone that is your peer, one of your friends, and like you're getting to know, and I'm not saying that that's their intention, but that's essentially what a date should be.
Potential.
It's potential. Yeah, you never know what it'll become. So in that way, I think that's how you should date. And this orange book, again, that I was talking about, it presents this idea of friendship dating, which I think, there's definitely some flaws to the book too, but I do want to say the idea that categorically we remain friends, but you have now intention to see and find the clarity if you can potentially move forward with them to something greater. And then even from there, it doesn't mean you become married, but it means you are able to now impose this exclusivity on yourselves and say, I want to see where it goes.
So what do you say to someone who did that, gave dating a try, and it just didn't work out. And, of course, there's feelings involved, and it didn't work out. But, it still hurts.
Yeah.
To be honest, what do you tell to that person or even former couple?
Right.
Like, what do you do? Or what's some advice you would give them in terms of, I guess, back to the question, do they stay at the same church?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put my 2 cents in that. I think that's way easier. If, obviously, there was no physical intimacy involved, like, it is, I think, easier. Way easier.
To like tell them to just to stay at the same church, you mean?
Yeah, stay at the same church, stay
yeah.
in the same friend group.
But I would not say that to them because I'm sure they're still devastated by the breakup and stuff.
I would just tell them that it gets better. Honestly, that once this thing has passed, it is possible. I mean, knowing what you know, it is possible to get back to that level of friendship.
Sure.
And I've seen it happen.
Sure.
And it's totally possible.
It's possible, by God's grace. Yeah. I think it's possible. I'd say to those people, Levy, and I've said it recently, and it's been, especially as I pastor young adults, I feel like I do it more than most. But if they're able to stay in the community, I would say even in my history of how many people I've seen go their separate ways, I would say if you're able to stay in the same community, that's the grace of God. Yeah. It's a beautiful, merciful thing. But then beyond that, I would say so especially let's say we're talking about people where they're not in the same, they can't be in the same friend group anymore. I would say just surround yourself with, the brothers or the sisters. And if they kind of understand right now, we can't all hang out like we used to, that's fine. Be there for that person. Adjust and be there for them. And yet again, that's why I would say this really depends on how they dated. If they dated completely unhealthy, it's going to be like, you're going to have to like rewind all the way back. You're going to basically have to come to like terms with just going back to just being like, you just got to church for the first time together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But if it's someone where like you've been walking with them, they made mistakes and they got close and still it didn't work out, I feel like if they've had people walking with them, they're always going to be in a better position because it's more of like a healthy, walking with them and things like that. But I would I think Amy's right. Like it does get better. It can get better, but it can actually stay worse. It can be bad. But I would say like the practical advice would be, as long as this is a church that you want to be at, and as long as you guys are able to be civil and understand that that's your sister in Christ, that's someone who Christ has shed his blood for, and you see them in that lens rather than someone that I had a history with. I think it should allow you to...
The person who broke my heart.
Yeah, rather than that, but being able to forgive each other and forgive each other for the past mistakes and still be able to grow and want the best for them. I would say actually, nuance-wise, I don't think for a lot of those people, especially if they were very involved, especially like things like sexually and intimately, I would say you can never go back to being friends. It will never, it will never be the same, but you still can forgive each other, want the best for each other, root for each other, because that's what we can do as Christians. And I think on this side of glory, that might be the best you get. But that's better than most. Most people just end up never seeing that person you broke with ever again.
Burning that bridge.
Complete avoidance.
And they might actually have like really negative feelings towards you and you might not even know. So I think if you're able to still get through it, I think that is it's a beautiful grace. And that's why it's so important to remember that dating is a community project. That's one big thing as well. Like we live in an individualistic society, so dating it's about me, it's my thing. Why should I tell you what I'm doing? Well, this is what the bottom line, like you belong to the family of God, and you want that accountability. You want, it's not like the scary like uncles, maybe Levy, with especially maybe in like the Filipino culture where it's like like the uncles and the aunts and they're all there and maybe like you're scared to bring someone home. It's like that, like dude, like when Ollie starts dating, like it ain't gonna just be Levy and Benita. It's gonna be like all the brothers and sisters that Levy and Benita have to be able to.
I hate to say I'm not so concerned for Ollie. I'm concerned for all the female babies that we got going.
That's true.
Lots of uncles we got going.
Lots of uncles is very true.
Your future baby.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing that and that's why the infant baptism we did with John and Esther was so beautiful, because it's not just I'm gonna do my best to raise my child. It's like all your brothers and sisters are going to do their best to make sure that your child walks in the ways of the Lord. And I think that's it's a great thing. You know, it really is. So yeah.
All right, I do want to say we got to wrap it up. This is almost as long as the Sunday service.
That's long.
Really?
That is.
It's been almost an hour and a half. My camera has already died. I'm scared these lights are gonna die because they're running on battery.
Oh no! Okay.
Amy, you want to close it up? Maybe
Yes.
a last question or just a final thought?
No. So that was actually the end of the questions. Yeah, no. I feel like this went exactly as I wanted it to. My vision is becoming real.
Wow.
It's scary. It's scary to kind of put myself out there.
No, this is good. I feel like we're a little stiff.
We're a little stiff.
yeah,
We're a little
yeah.
stiff.
Oh, I'm excited for your growth, though. You know, I'm sure you're gonna like in a year or two, assuming that we keep going, you're gonna look back at this one and you're gonna be like, oh gosh.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna cringe. I'm like, oh god. Oh yes, but I'm so happy to have brought, you know, P. Rich here, you know, who does pastor young adults, and to kind of bring into
Kills
his
Thank you.
his wisdom, his credibility.
Limited wisdom.
What's the next topic for next
I don't even
episode?
know.
So
co-host.
I wasn't actually going to say it before we had our meeting, but I really wanted to talk about community.
Ooh.
And I wanted to talk about what communities look like in certain colleges, because I know and I've heard that certain Christian communities and colleges look different than others.
Yet also fall to the same patterns.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
so-
and then I know cliques is a hot word
Clicks.
in churches, especially you know, Korean Christian churches. I know it's maybe an old scar for some. Maybe, you know, some people don't know what it's like. Some people were in it, some people were out of it.
Sure.
It's, you know, it's a hot topic for sure. So I did want to talk about that. P-Rich, you're welcome whenever you want.
Oh.
It's exciting. Can I just say one last thing as we close? Because for especially our members, I think this is, I hope this is encouraging. This has been a great conversation. But I do want to say, you know, Levy was saying, you know, you say, I don't want to date in our church like brothers and sisters. I'm sure we can attest to that, the three of us, that the best person you can marry is your best friend.
Yeah.
And if you serve with brothers and sisters in your church and you see them and you see them as godly men and women, and they're sacrificing their time, especially in their singleness, right? The Apostle Paul says the advantage of being single or being unmarried is that you're able to devote your full time to the church and the service of the church. But I do want to say that for you know, the men and women in our church who are single and are, you know, who want to get married, who have that desire and that calling from God, like in your heart, I think QPEM is a place where we don't want it to be so like, you know, like taboo, for the sake of a better word, right? But understanding that marriage is a beautiful thing. It's a gift from God. God redeems and he works in families and covenant, and we want our young people to get married. We want them to date in a healthy way, and we don't want this to be like a church where it's like, oh, people are scared, or you're waiting for the feeling or the light to fall on that person as they walk into the chapel. Like, if there is someone that you see of the opposite gender and you feel like they are a godly person, they love God, they love their community, they love their family, they're not perfect, but they are striving in these ways, and God is sanctifying in those ways. You know, I would encourage you with coming up to, you know, myself, Pastor Peter, the elders, or even the older brothers and sisters we have here at QPEM who are very wise, especially our young married couples who we've seen a great growth in, right? In the last 2 years I've been here. Just talk to one of them and let them know that you're interested, and you think about how you want to possibly move forward. Especially, I'd encourage the guys to take that first step and, you know, show your hand to the sisters. And, you know, I just wanted to make it clear, like, for our church, like, we want people to date, we want people to get married, we want more children in our church, and we think that's how God really will bless us as we go forward. So yeah.
So this is what I heard: stop using dating apps.
Come to church.
That's what I heard.
Dating apps can be a whole nother topic.
Levy
but
just wants those.
I'm with Levy on this one, brother. I'm with Levy.
That's all I heard when you were talking.
You know,
Stop using dating apps.
That's all I was thinking, actually.
If
There's great people in the church.
Absolutely. If you're in our church, if you're at QPEM, there are so many great, especially recently, like this great influx of young adults, you know, and we've seen them, and, you know, we're blessed to serve with them and get to know them, and we know that, you know, God can really, and God's working on them. So yeah, absolutely. Like this I hope this doesn't like create this like weird expectation and we see everyone being weird from like a middle school dance dance, on the side. No, I
arm's
hope
length.
Yeah, I hope it's
Exactly what I
nothing
was
like
thinking.
that. But I hope we are able to really show marriage, sex, children. These are glorious gifts from God. And we want to encourage and we want to bolster these things in our community, because ultimately, and the funny thing, me, Levy, our combined marriage, the time we've been married is probably less than like one of our elders by probably half, right? So we're not the marriage gurus out here. We're like all under 35 out here, but at the same time, in our marriages, we've been able to experience so much grace, and I think that's something we want. It's not to say like it's expectation we put on everyone, but we do want to encourage and say that this is something that we hope to see in our church done in a healthy way unto the glory of God for the kingdom of God. So I'll just end it with that.
Can we put a couple plugs? Like if anyone has any topics they would like us to cover?
Yes. So if you liked what we talked about, please feel free.
Or if you hated it.
Please don't hate it.
Let us know why anyway, because it helps the algorithm if you comment on us. It doesn't matter.
Yes,
just comment
please let us know what you want to hear from us or what you want us to talk about, or send it anonymously. We just want topics. We don't want to know who it came from.
And I believe Pastor Austin has another plug.
Oh, I love you, Levy. I don't think I'm about to
shoot this one down.
Yeah, we're
now
about
go
to
ahead.
edit this out.
Go ahead. You deserve it. You deserve it.
Well, as mentioned before, I am the children's pastor of the KM side of our church. If anyone wants to serve in our VBS, Vacation Bible School 3-day program from June 29th to July 1st, hit me up. It'll be fun. I swear it's fun.
Can you guarantee it'll be fun?
I cannot guarantee. I cannot guarantee anything besides work.
Will the brothers or sisters be meeting other brothers and sisters in serving?
I know a few people who, through serving the church, whatever church, that they found their spouse through it.
All right, that's not the reason you should sign up.
If you want to vent afterward, then we could have a podcast episode about that.
That's true.
It's just helpful. I'm not.
Yeah. Can I give a final plug? This is for QPEM. We're gonna announce this is coming, or I don't know when this is gonna live. If this might not make it out of the graveyard, right? But we're gonna be doing the Bible study again, starting up on the 23rd of April, and we're gonna be actually doing supplementary teaching to the small group material, which is talking about gender and sexual identity and men and women in the church, and we're gonna be talking about some tough passages, but it's gonna be good supplementary teaching. So again, I'm realizing as I'm saying this probably won't come out by that time, but to know we have a lot of great things going on.
I will try. I will try.
Levy has a beautiful son.
Levy, I told the ladies that it's going to be released during our retreat.
Oh, wonderful. When's the retreat again?
21st to the 23rd.
Weekend of the 22nd.
Alrighty.
Next week. You want to close it up? Do you have a nice little conclusion for us?
No, I just want to thank P. Rich for coming out here.
Of course.
Thanks
for his time, for his preparation. And just giving us
prepared.
He was.
I love talking, so the podcast is a dangerous thing for me.
It really is a dangerous thing for you.
No, but I was, to be honest, I was really anxious coming into this week, but I think it went really well by the grace of God.
You did a great job. Thanks for preparing everything.
Thanks for having us. Nice and cozy area.
Cozy.
No, all the equipment.
Sam is cooped up in his room right now, just dying to come out.
He had to sneak up the stairs and just.
We didn't know he was coming up. But I love doing this, and our next episode will be recorded in a month. So this is a monthly thing for now.
Yes.
For now.
Yes.
For now.
But we commit to that monthly schedule and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we will,
Sounds good.
Kind of see.
Thank you, Levy, as well.
Seriously, thank you, Levy, with all his equipment. All his time,
You're welcome. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe sign us off. Do a nice spontaneous sign off to this camera, to the audience.
I don't know what to do other than cover my hand to the lens like in 2010.
That's a vlogger from 2010. God.
That's all I know what to do. I don't know what to do.
Well, thank you for listening if you did. Thank you for watching. We don't know how long this is going to be, but if you made it through the whole thing, Lord have mercy, and make sure you're using your time wisely. Thank you.
Please, take our words with not a grain of salt, but
test them. Test all things.
Yeah.
Amen.
Test them. That's a good way to put it.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Date other Christians. That's a wrap.
Stop taking out of context lines by Levy. Bye.